Welcome to the Scuba GOAT Podcast with Matt Waters. Let's dive right in.
Over the past 5 years, there has been 16 liveaboard dive vessels that have caught fire or sunk, claiming lives and raising urgent questions about safety at sea. What standards exist, how are they enforced, and what are the barriers to a globally recognised standard for this ever-growing industry? This is the start of a series of episodes focused on liveaboard safety. Currently, there are no specific global regulations for liveaboard vessels, and dare I say that this is unlikely to change for many reasons. Vessel location, flag state or ownership, vessel modification loopholes leading to dodgy builds, the materials used in such builds, poor regulation, and even unscrupulous operators and greed, let alone the politics of creating such a body. When booking a vacation, we provide a level of trust to the operator, and that trust is accompanied by assumption. An assumption that has to be in place to allow us to make a booking confidently. However, just because an operation states it has a safety structure in place doesn't necessarily mean it is. Considering that we will not be seeing any global plan anytime soon, we need to be able to recognise and separate the unscrupulous operators from those who do their utmost to achieve a safety standard that not only complies with local regulations, but in many cases exceeds them. Those who set their own standards, learn from failings and incidences, and improve their system to benefit all on board. Recognise that incidents may become more frequent with the increase in vessels on the market, more scuba diving vacationers, and the advancement in tech creating further hazards on a vessel. Recognise that the blame doesn't necessarily rest on the shoulders of just the operators. Everybody in the system must take ownership of their contribution to the failings. That includes customers forcing a race to the bottom pricing market, enticing corner cutting by dodgy operators. Booking agents filling sales pages with alluring green ticks on the say-so of the operator who's filling in that advertisement just to get on their website. We can pool our resources, gather the relevant information from owners, operators, cruise directors, listen to personal experiences and subject matter experts. By collaborating and pooling this knowledge, we can expand the knowledge base for would-be travellers seeking their next adventure. Now, I plan to leverage the reach of my podcast to maintain focus on liveaboard safety and find out as much as we can to assist all involved in our amazing sport, with the added bonus that we may just save a life or two whilst we're at it. In this episode of the Scuba GOAT Podcast, I sit down with marine engineer and AMSA-accredited surveyor Mick Uberti, founder of MSA and MSI. With experience spanning super yachts, government regulation, and hands-on vessel surveys, including some of Egypt's dive liveaboards, Mick has seen the best and worst of commercial marine safety. We dive into the need for a globally recognised liveaboard safety standard, the risks divers unknowingly take, and what can be done to make these trips safer for everyone. Now, this is just the beginning of a multi-episode deep dive into liveaboard safety, culminating in a roundtable discussion that every scuba traveller needs to hear. If you feel you have something to bring to the discussion, comment below or message me directly and let's make change together.
His name just escapes me right now, but he had rang me a couple of times, and anyway, we did it. But no, he came across very, very professional in what he did. But like I said, it's just the way the media there operate, isn't it? It's like they're trying to take something that, like you're going to try and do and dive deep and what you've already been doing, rather than just try and form an opinion based on a 5 or 10 second snippet that you see on the evening news. That's the way our society's gone now, hasn't it?
Yeah. It has. Everyone's got the attention span of a gnat, which is, it's a nightmare on most levels. But when you start talking engineering, and like I'm a geek, I did 17 years as a gas turbines engineer in the Air Force. So I go down the rabbit hole and you can just see them phase out. They're just gone. 5 seconds, done. Swipe left.
I mean, you say that, but then long form podcasting right now, the Joe Rogans and these types, I mean, these are 3 hour long things and people seem to stay engaged for a long time. So I think there's still a bunch of people out there that are really happy to be engaged and listen and learn and then form their own opinion based on a lot of information,
Yeah. Oh, mate, I mean, long form podcast, I think it's a fabulous setup. I mean, we've got the ADEX show next week in Sydney for 2 days, and I'm doing 10-minute recordings, 10-minute interviews. But in general, most of my recordings are around about the hour and a half to 2 hours, 10 minutes. And it's the freedom to be able to speak and get a point across without it being from a text or a script. And you're listening to people that, like yourself, that, you know, you've got the knowledge from inside the topic that we want to discuss and highlight. And the amount of people that listen to the podcast and say, especially here in Oz, it's you know, as soon as they set off on a road trip, here we go. We've got another episode or two that we can listen to while smashing down the road, you know.
Great.
It's fabulous. And I find there's also quite a lot of listeners that tend to commute, especially in the cities like here. And you can sit on the bus and you can see, you know, people swiping all the time on their social medias, but they've all got headphones on, so they're all listening to something. And if you can bring a topic of importance to the lug holes and they can digest it while doing other stuff, then it's fabulous. And I would suggest that the download numbers that we've got for the show coming through, that it's gaining momentum month by month.
Fantastic.
Which is nice, especially seeing as it's so niche as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's such a small sport. But yeah, I think I think podcasting's the good way to get information across and try and circumnavigate this 5-second attention span that everyone seems to have with social media.
Agreed.
I don't get on well with social media. You know, I've got to do stuff for the show and for my diving company, but I know that I can put in an hour's work to do a 30-second reel, and it's there for 5-10 minutes, and then, you know, people have moved on to the next thing. So it's a lot of work for not a lot of gain.
Matt, what's your diving company?
Oh, Nomadic Scuba.
Okay, cool. And
It's,
and what's your spiel?
well, it's a travel company. So I started it in 2017, and it came out of the. There was a constant cycle of people, old customers and guests, that would contact me and say, "Hey Matt, do you know anyone in such and such a location? Because we'd love to go diving there." And it was just a natural progression from instructing and managing dive operations into assisting people with bookings. So, you know, we've not gone at massive acceleration. We just took our time to get it where it is now. And the website only went live about 3.5 months ago because we got caught up in COVID, and, you know, we paid a lot of money to a website designer that it then became a bit obsolete after 2 years of not being able to travel. So the new one's up and running, and I assist people booking their vacations and also lead expeditions as well. Focusing on the Australian market, or you take bookings from anywhere in the world? It's definitely global. Yeah. I've got I'd say 40%, 45% of my market is Australia, and then the rest is America, Canada, predominantly, even down into like Romania. I've got a few guests there as well. Yeah. What side of the River Thames were you from there? So I was born up in Lancashire, so several miles north of Liverpool. Yeah. You know the UK well? I did all my engineering study over there when I went to sea. So down at Southampton, and spent about probably 8 years in Europe while working on boats. Yeah, and predominantly based in France, maybe France and Italy, but a fair bit of time in the UK as well. Okay, yeah, Southampton's quite a military town, isn't it? I think the Marines are down there, aren't they? Yeah, well, I think there's also the naval bases like Portsmouth as well, further down. Oh, yeah. But I was at Wasatch Maritime College. There's near in Fareham, so the small town there. It was a nice place. How did you pick the UK to do your education? Is it not good enough over here? No, I went to, well, I was originally a mechanic here in Australia, like did an apprenticeship as a mechanic, and then I had an opportunity to go work at sea, and then all the schooling, the courses for marine engineering were for the company that I started working for were based in the UK. So yeah, and then I went onto then when I moved off those boats, I went onto like super yachts, and I was working like 2 months on and off, and so I would go
go there and sort of complete more studies on more yachting based engineering courses and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So super yachts were like the private boats and
firstly
mega
commercial, and then I went on to like the super yachts. Yeah. So started on like a 40 meter 𝐧𝐸𝐿𝐵, which is like a Dutch super yacht, and that was based in the Middle East, in Dubai, working for the royal family there, and then spent like a couple of years with them, and then went on to other big boats, like a 60 meter German built boat. That was another super yacht that was mostly based in the Americas and back and forth to Europe. What else? And I even did a short stint on working on a boat called the Nicobel, which is, I think it's still owned by Richard Branson. So did like an Atlantic crossing on there. So yeah, I did my fair bit of time at sea. I think about 11, or I've tried to count them. I think it's 11 or 12 Atlantic crossings, and then gone from like Dubai to France a few times with the royal family doing those transits as well. Yeah, didn't really enjoy the whole super yacht scene, but more enjoyed the shipyard times, which probably says more about me. And that's how I moved into marine surveying. Like I decided it was time to move back to Australia, and got a job with the Marine Board in Victoria, and I was there for like nearly 8 years or 8.5 years, and then I started MSA. And yeah, we've grown. So there's myself and 3 other directors, and we have 13, 14 employees here, and then we've got a couple. Then we formed Maritime Survey International because of all the work we were doing abroad, and we have a large project we're doing in Spain of a new build. We're project managing that, and so a couple more guys over there, and that's the company we've been using for the Egyptian Liveaboard inspections as well. So I guess that was a long-winded way to go to how we get in there.
No, that's a very nice lead in, mate. It's almost like you scripted it.
I didn't script that bit.
I know. You're a natural. You need to do podcasting.
Not quite. How long have you been doing this podcast and stuff for?
We started this. I say we. I started this on the kitchen table when COVID hit, actually.
Oh, wow.
When COVID started the lockdowns, and the intention was to just maintain contact with my network in the industry and hopefully kill a bit of boredom, but also hopefully continue to promote their operations for as and when lockdown disappears, and try and get customers to their door. And it very quickly grew into, anything that caught my eye that I thought was an interesting topic. So we ended up with conservation efforts and scientists on the show talking about corals and their expansion coming from the tropics, coming down into the cooler waters. So no topic is off the table unless it's well outside the boundaries of our blue world. And I suppose this is why I've touched base with you as well for the issues that we're seeing constantly in Egypt and the liveaboard issues. And here we are now.
Yeah. Hey, cool.
So, in fact, I'll tell you, I think I was about 7 episodes deep, and I got an email through professing to be from Sylvia Earle's office. And if you don't know Sylvia Earle, she's effectively the female version of Sir David Attenborough over in America.
Okay.
And she's the lady, her royal deepness, that's just done everything and anything she can do for conservation, and a bit of a hero of mine. And I got this email, and it's requesting, to get Sylvia Earle on the show, and I'm like, nah, this is a spam. This is someone in middle of nowhere in Africa or something trying to get some money out of me. So I had to do a little bit of research on who was sending the email, and I was like, holy shit, this is real. Yeah. And lo and behold, I ended up having Sylvia on the show, and I expected her to be on for 40, 45 minutes and then on to the next job, But no, she stayed on and we chatted for a good couple of hours.
Oh, good on you. Well done.
Yeah, yeah. And good on her as well to give up her time for some random bloke down in Oz.
Very cool. I'll have to listen to that one then. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she's a good one.
I have to confess, okay. I'm not big into diving. I have to confess that. The most diving I've done is like around the cleaning hulls of boats. So that's I've been to some nice dive locations in the world and had fun there, but I have a PADI dive certificate and that's about as far as it goes. I wouldn't call myself by any stretch of the imagination any sort of experienced diver.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, you're intrinsically linked into the diving world just because of what you're doing right now.
I guess so.
Yeah. I mean, it's and again, this is, like I say, it's a good example of not particularly a diving topic, but it's related to, and what we were saying earlier on about the general media and how quickly it flashes by and disappears and onto the next story. So hence I think it was a good idea for us to have a chat, because my main goal out of this is to get a better understanding from a professional eye on what we should be looking for on liveaboards, what guests should be expecting to see when they get on a boat, and how to listen to that little voice in the back of their head that says, hold on a moment, something's not quite right, and having the confidence to get off the boat. And it's a big concern for all of us, but it's not only damaging or risking those people that are getting on the boat, but it's also damaging those operators and those operations that are out there that do their utmost to make everything as safe as possible. And I say as safe as possible because we are effectively putting, a baked bean tin on top of water full of electrical stuff and gas and God knows what else. So it's a risky business, but we've got to some way maintain this topic of conversation and keep it on point and in the limelight so that it doesn't disappear and the low grade operations out there continue to put people's lives at risk.
Agreed with all that. Yeah. I think passengers in general, they have a reasonable expectation that a vessel that plies for hire or reward is fit for purpose. Like when they arrive there, they just have an expectation that, hey, these guys are a commercial operator, that, I should be safe. No different to when you and I go and jump on an aeroplane. There's an expectation we're going to be safe. Unfortunately, with a lot of these dive liveaboards, especially in the case of Egypt, they ply their trade relatively unregulated, even though they have the certification in place from the Egyptian Maritime Authority. This is an annual certificate of registration that they actually complete an inspection and then jump on board. So it's tough for the passenger, and they have to dig a little bit deeper if they want to ensure their safety. And I actually think that while, you can talk about government regulation, increasing education and training for these operators, have an enforcement mechanism and all that sort of stuff. And the more and more I've learned about Egypt and a lot of the other world that has these types of vessels operating, for dive liveaboards, I understand that they are not kitted up. They do not have the regulatory authority nor the funding to treat this in the same manner that we would in, like you mentioned, Australia or the UK, or most of the West. So I think if we just encourage public accountability, so that when the passenger and charter clients, when they book on board the vessel, start inquiring about safety, ask, is the vessel certified? When was it last inspected? Start putting pressure on the operator to prioritise on safety. And even when they're getting on board, because like in the case of Egypt, they will show you a valid certificate. They'll even show you the shiny, They've got a little logo that keeps them safe and all these travel stars and all that sort of stuff. But it doesn't really mean a lot. So yeah, maybe they have to take that next step. And when you're walking past the life rafts, have a look at the dates on them. Ask them about the fire extinguishers and the fixed firefighting systems. If you can, just have a look at the engine room. Just see how clean and tidy it is. Going to the wheelhouse, have a look around there. Just basic things, just to see if they have a lot of navigation equipment, if the radios are actually working. Just little things like that the layman can do, I guess. That's probably where I would start. But did you want me to talk about what we've done at MSI, for this, take it a step further?
Oh yeah, let's delve deep. I think. Before we do that though,
yeah.
I think it's important to point out your authority on this topic of discussion that we're having.
Sure.
So a lot of people will listen to it and think, "Oh, hold on a minute, who's this guy talking?"
Yeah.
So where does your authority come from?
Right. So I'm a marine engineer. I am a marine surveyor. So usually the pathway from being a marine surveyor is once you've spent time at sea or as a naval architect, then you can transition into a more specialised role as a marine surveyor. A marine surveyor's role is to inspect a vessel to an applied set of standards to determine whether the vessel is fit for purpose or not. We complete condition reports, valuation reports. We do pre-purchase surveys, on-hire surveys, off-hire surveys, things like that. Ultimately, we are looking at the condition of a vessel to determine whether it's fit for purpose for that owner or operator to use. We do work on behalf of, in this case in Australia, we do work on behalf of the Australian government. So AMSA, the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, and they accredit us as marine surveyors. So to be an AMSA-accredited marine surveyor, you must have had industry experience and then also go through their examination process as well. There's not that many of us in Australia. I think there's around about 50 or 60 AMSA-accredited marine surveyors in Australia. On top of that, I have a UK qualification as a 𝐧𝐸𝐬𝐿 auditor. That's a controlled marine inspection document auditor, where the focus is more on safety management systems and auditing those on board vessels. So I've spent around about 15 years as a marine surveyor to date. So that was 8.5 years with a government regulator, and now about 8 years on April the 1st it'll be with our own company, Maritime Survey Australia. We're also appointed flag state inspectors on behalf of Marshall Islands and Cook Islands as well. So I guess that's our level of authority as a company, and me personally of what I've done.
Yeah, good on you. So one other thing I think we need to highlight as well is that, I mean, it's quite confusing unless you spend time to sit down and look through documents and explanations, all that kind of stuff about flag states and what is recognised as a seaworthy vessel when we're looking at SOLAS and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Can you give some sort of explanation that to Joe Public so we can
Sure.
get them on par?
When a vessel is operating domestically, they don't require a flag state. So in Australia, you're just considered a domestic commercial vessel, and that's the same case all over the world. The moment you intend to or take an international voyage, then at that point you apply a set of more onerous standards, and they come in the form of a lot of the International Maritime Organization conventions. And they formed SOLAS as a result of the Titanic in 1912. Then there's the MARPOL Convention as a result of the 𝐧𝐸𝐬𝐿 incident in the UK in 1970s or 80s. Quote me on that one. Then there's the ISM code, a result of the Herald of Free Enterprise incident in 1987 in Brussels to UK. You probably recall that one. And then you have, which ones am I forgetting? The ISPS code, that's International Ship Port Security Code. That was a result of the 9/11. So it's always been a major incident or accident that has brought about change. It's usually what happens, and probably the way we're going with this here as well. As to answer your question about flag states, so as just in their very nature, ships or vessels are elusive, they need to comply with some sort of set of laws. So if you're an Australian vessel and you are making an international voyage, then when you are operating that vessel globally, if your vessel is flagged in Australia, you then must comply with all of the Australian rules and regulations on board that vessel, no matter where you are. So that's where you have a lot of flags of convenience, or international registries, as they're called. And so if you are flagged in with something like the Marshall Islands or Cayman Islands or Cook Islands or whatever, Liberia, there's some of the larger ones globally, then you comply with those laws. Some are less onerous than others. Some can be just a complete race to the bottom. However, most of the flag states, though, are signatories to all those IMO conventions that I mentioned. So it's not just the reasons for choosing a different flag state over one or another is not necessarily to avoid a rule set. In some cases, it might just be because there's a lot less, there might be a tax incentive, but it might be a lot less onerous in terms of compliance with other conventions and codes and things like that. So, yes, they exist. They're all out there, and all of the biggest cruise ship companies and so on and so forth use these flags of convenience globally all the time.
Okay. Let's now run down the rabbit hole of how you got involved with Egypt, how you've been drawn into this topic.
Sure. So Maritime Survey International, we were engaged by a client of ours, as Saudi Arabian University, to go and inspect 8 liveaboard vessels in Egypt. The reason for the inspection is they wanted to charter these vessels for up to 12 months for their students. And they had an incident with a previous boat that they had chartered, and they weren't comfortable getting one without a prior inspection. So
good on it.
Yeah, I guess so. So they wanted to do their due diligence, I guess. I didn't know much about these Egyptian liveaboard boats until I got there, and we went and when I say we, just me, I went on this trip, but I was accompanied by it was quite interesting. I had the director of one of the marine science laboratories from Saudi. So he came on board. There was a dive guy, and then there was a procurement guy. So there was four of us crawling around these boats, and then there was the owner's representative, and then there was the captain. These boats aren't that big, and I've got everyone just watching me. A marine survey is not that exciting, right? So I'm walking around with my iPad, and I'm going through, a checklist. I take images, I record things. It's watching someone do an audit. It's I'm not doing it with a unicycle or juggling balls or anything like that. It's not that exciting. But I have got used to it over the years with doing a pre-purchase survey, and I get it. Someone's about to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a boat, and they really want to see what I'm doing. But generally, after 10 minutes, they realise this is pretty boring, and they go and find the local coffee shop, and they just say, "Oh, call me when you're done," type thing. So you'd probably be the more inquisitive type, Matt, and you would stay there the whole time and bug me. Yeah, so
I'd be a pain in the ass. Yeah, I really would.
So I was fortunate enough on these ones. They went off straight and did their coffees, and left me alone. Now, I looked at, we started in Sharm el-Sheikh. We then went to Alexandria, and then we saw a new build in Alexandria, and then we went to Hurghada over the other side. In total, I looked at 14 vessels, but I only completed 8 reports, as the other ones, they didn't really warrant more than about a 5-minute inspection. And then I just realised, okay, look, you're not going to use this boat. This is definitely just not going to be fit for purpose. And you could make that assumption within 5 minutes, right? The findings on all the vessels were really similar. They all present interior and cabins and sleeping berths that are really good, like really good condition, like super yacht standard, that really, really nice, because that's the selling point for the charter operator. No one that wants to go on a 5-day liveaboard trip or a week liveaboard trip, I don't think they're walking on board and saying, can I please have a look at the engine room first? I don't think that's a question, and nor should it be, right? Like, I mean, let's be real. I mean, they want to make sure that they're going to be comfortable on board. And like I said before, there's just an expectation that the vessel are going to be safe. So the deficiencies in most cases that I found, many of them were not expensive to repair or replace. And in most cases, compliance with safety and contemporary standards is simply just unknown to the crew and the operator. They're just not educated in this space. And, our expectations are quite high, because the diver's probably paying, I don't know, whatever they're paying for a 1 or 2 week liveaboard trip. But I think just bear in mind that the captain on these boats is getting $300 a month, and the engineers and the rest of the crew are getting a lot less. So the fact that they didn't know much was interesting. So the Egyptian Authority for Maritime Safety, that's EAMS, they're the concerned authority in Egypt regarding the technical standards, compliance and registration. So any excursion vessel, as they're called in Egypt, that's more than 10 tonnes, which go beyond the regional waters there, they're required to be registered. So they actually do an inspection and then revalidate this. But these regulations are really poorly enforced. For example, just one of the standards that they need to comply with is the collision regulations. So the collision regulations is the rules of the road for commercial boats, or for any boat, to be honest, globally. So these were developed in 1972, and so, for example, almost every country in the world is a signatory to this convention, and so this, as in layman's terms, means that you must have your port and starboard light, your all-round light on, to show people where you are going. So Egypt is actually a signatory to this convention since 1986, but the navigation lights on all the vessels that I looked at didn't meet any of the collision regulation requirements. The lights weren't separately fused. The reason why they're supposed to be separately fused is that it ensures when one navigation light goes out, they all don't go out. They didn't meet any basic navigation requirements. They were missing charts. Most had no radars or substandard radars on board. They didn't have code flags and things like that. So I guess that's just one of the parts of the standards that's one that they're obligated to comply with, and they didn't even come close, these boats. Can I just say that one of the operators that we did, and I'm sure they won't mind me mentioning their names, Tornado Marine, we only did one of their boats as part of this audit for the university, and they really took this on board and rolled with it. I'd like to say it was because they thought they want to get the best possible safety outcome, but they knew that the only way that they would get their boats chartered for like these lucrative 1 and 2 year charters for some of the work they're doing around NEOM in Saudi Arabia was to meet these contemporary standards and make their boats, a higher rating. And they did. And when we went back the start of this year, one of our other surveyors went there, that they're certainly, they're at least satisfactory, all their vessels. So that's, I guess,
Okay.
one positive outcome we've had from this as well.
I think that's interesting, because I think Tornado Marine had an incident, didn't they? I was just trying to have a quick look there.
Yeah, they have.
They've got a history, I think.
I think every company that I searched while I was there had somewhat of a history there. But these guys were genuinely interested. You could tell they weren't just whenever I found something wrong, and we had a closing meeting with them, and I was talking to them about what they needed. Like even for example, life jackets. Like they were using 50 Newton life jacket. What that means is that the average person is 80 kilos, and you need at least 150 newtons to float that person. So if I'm, for example, I'm about 4 kilos. If I'm wearing a 50 Newton jacket, that's not going to float me. So it doesn't have a collar on it. It's not a SOLAS approved jacket, for example. And so I didn't see any good life jackets on any of these boats. And this guy, I'm sure they were financial enough. And the next time I went back, all of their boats were decked out with SOLAS life jackets straight away. So, like I said, that was a real positive change that we made from that.
Yeah. I think, this is not a Liveaboard company bashing route that I'm going down over the next few months. More so, I'm actually impressed by those companies that have had incidents and then have made positive change and learned from them and do their utmost to bring safety to the fore. And it's unfortunate that it takes an incident for it to occur, but at least it's not being ignored. The ones that do ignore it are the ones that we've got major concerns with.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. So do you want me to just go through like some of the findings that I found and stuff like that?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, okay. So in the communication side of things, so most of the vessels did actually have an operating VHF radio. However, none of them had a HF radio, so high frequency radio, or even a satellite phone. None of the vessels had any emergency radio batteries to ensure that the radio will work in the event of a power failure or anything like that. And none of the vessels on board had an onboard communication system to alert passengers and crew with instructions in the event of an emergency, like, just a PA system or anything like that. Only one boat that I inspected had an in-date EPIRB on board. So that's the emergency positioning indicating rescue beacon. So when in the event of an emergency, if the vessel went down, for example, this will automatically go off and alert satellites and alert whichever rescue authority is there. So you would think that would be like something that you would just see normally. All the vessels lacked safety equipment that would be even considered appropriate for as expected for a passenger vessel. So when I went there, it would be really unfair to apply like the national standard for commercial vessels or even the UK workboat standard. So I just tried our best to form a template that mostly best practice, but where they had an obligation to comply, then we're applying that. So, for example, collision regulations. We did look at and have applied the Caribbean dive liveaboard standard, which was made in connection with the IMO, and we've got a copy of that standard on our website as well. If anyone wanted to have a look at that, it's probably the lowest standard that we could find, but at least it was something that had been applied and audited by the IMO, even though they haven't put their like stamp on it or anything like that. But making these boats comply with 2025 contemporary standards from day one, it's just not achievable. So it's best to say, right, well, let's do the things that you can do. Like, there's no reason why you can't comply with safety equipment standards. So that's what we implied on them. Many of the life rafts that I looked at, they didn't have any supporting certification. There was no markings on the life rafts. none of them I looked at had a hydrostatic release. What that is if the vessel goes down, it is a system that it cuts a little rope. There's like a little razor that cuts a rope to allow the life raft to float free. It's still hooked up to the vessel with a painter line, with a rope, and therefore people can get on board it. But none of them had that feature on there. Most of the life rafts were installed in a position where it wouldn't even be possible to launch it without 3 or 4 people. Some of the life rafts had no dates on them at all, like they'd scrubbed them off, stuff like that. None of the life jackets were clearly marked with the vessel ID, and they didn't display, like they didn't even have lights on them or anything like that. So yeah, really poor in that case. In terms of fire safety, sorry, go on.
Would it be, just referring to the life jackets, would it be fair to assume that these would be the kind of life jackets that they'd probably be using on the local resorts for jet skiers and
they're the ones,
surfers, that kind of thing?
Yeah, they're the ones.
Yeah.
The clip and what do they say, the zip and clip ones, you know?
Yeah.
The one that you buy in the bargain barrel from Woolies. Yeah.
Yeah. I got no chance at 120 kilos. I'm going down with one of those things on.
There you go.
Jesus.
Yeah, they were, and most of them, I must say, a lot of them were like brand new, you know, still in the cover, but it's just going to be good for no one, you know. Like, I didn't see any children life jackets at all. They don't become mandatory until over a certain amount of passengers or tonnage on boats, but you know, I guess for a level of comfort, if they're having children on board, you would want to see life jackets for children. None of the boats had a fixed firefighting system. The purpose of this is to extinguish an engine room fire. So this works remotely by shutting down fans and vents and opening, closing off the fuel. Once all the closing devices are closed, then remotely you operate a fixed firefighting system that will extinguish that fire. None of the boats had that. That's like a mandatory requirement on most commercial boats, and even recreational boats come out with that as well. Only one of the boats that I looked at had an actual fixed detection system, and that one, on that case there, that wasn't even commissioned. The fire detection system should be a fixed system that can alert the crew via a panel and alarm, not one of those $8.50 ones that you buy from Woolies to, you know, you stick on with a double-sided tape. Yeah, it doesn't really help. So all of the vessels that I looked at didn't have one working fire pump. And so none of them had operational fire hydrants on board, and none of them had a fire safety plan displayed either.
Jesus.
None of them had structural fire protection. So that's like an insulation around an engine room. So it makes the boundary, it prevents the boundary from heating up quickly and the fire spreading. But none of them had that. That's a requirement on most commercial boats, or all commercial boats that carry passengers. There's none of them had it, especially berthed accommodation. They didn't have that. The galleys, all of them had a deep fat fryer, but none of them had a fire extinguisher system that was suitable to extinguish a fire over the top of that in the case. The crew accommodation was really interesting. Like we touched on before, I mean, these guys are getting paid pittance. So the fact that they get a bed is probably a bonus for these guys, right? But there's a minimum requirement. One of those other IMO conventions that I didn't mention before is the Maritime Labour Convention, which came about in 2006. And that was for that was brought about so seafarers could meet minimum living standards on board boats. They could meet minimum hours of rest, that it ensured that they would be repatriated, that they would ensure that they would be paid. So that's why they came about. So I just tried to apply on some of the bigger boats the minimum and maximum berths per cabin and stuff like that. So even though I understand these boats were used domestically, but it was just a benchmark, you know, because it's just a minimum size. But none of these, So, for example, the MLC, Maritime Labour Convention, states that there's a maximum of 4 berths per cabin and 1 bathroom for each cabin, and none of these vessels meet that standard or even close. For example, one of the vessels, I won't say the name, but there's a crew of 10 in 1 cabin with 1 bathroom. So, yeah. I've seen worse than that in my years, though, but that was pretty bad. One of the vessels had the crew accommodation located forward of the collision bulkhead, so that's like a no. Yeah.
And just to clarify, the collision bulkhead is to protect against impact from.
Yeah, correct. So it's a watertight subdivision.
They're inside getting squished.
Yeah. So I think a crew cabin is not permitted to be in a work area such as on the bridge or the galley or an engine room or anything like that. As the crew are supposed to be rested when they're off. So the upside on all these boats was the interiors, like I touched on before, like the interior and guest accommodation on these vessels really present in really, really good condition, and enough to entice most people to want to go on board, for a week or two. Why not? They really did look good. I mean, the fixtures and fittings were all nice. That was the first thing that they would start refitting on the boats that were starting to look a bit tardy that I saw in the shipyards there as well.
Speaking of the shipyards, I want to jump in on that one. And I remember when I first put a post out about this topic, and I coined the phrase "lipstick on a pig," because there's those rumours, and whether they're facts or not, I don't know. But using old registered hulls that are of wooden origin to then build upon and create this lavish, outwardly looking, beautiful vessel. Did you see any of that at the shipyards?
I did not, but I did hear all those stories too. I mean, I didn't dig deep enough into that. How this came about was that after I did all these inspections, I then just started searching about, who's doing something about it? Because I reached out to the Egyptian Maritime Safety Authority and I said, hey, I'm also certified with the International Institute of Marine Surveyors. So, I feel that there's a level of responsibility just to at least alert the local authority that what I saw wasn't safe. For example, in Australia, as an AMSA-accredited marine surveyor, we have that obligation on our accreditation. Yeah, so if we're on a commercial vessel and we feel that that's not safe, we should let someone know. So I just felt that was like professional due diligence to let someone know about it. So I did, but I got donuts from them. And then in my searches, I came across Justice, who had completed a thesis on diver liveaboard incidents and accidents. I'm sure you've read that, have you, Matt?
I have, yes.
Yeah. And so I thought, geez, this is an interesting guy. Let me get in touch with him. And then he was interested to chat, and he said, could he see the reports? And that's not something I'm able to give because I did that work on behalf of a client. So that rests with the clients. But what I did was I reached out to the the Saudi Arabian University, and I said, hey, these guys are really interested in making change here and being proactive. Would you mind if I got rid of all of the sensitive details on that? Would you mind if I share those reports with those guys? And they were more than happy to have them. So that was great. And then I met up with Armin and JP from Taucha. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Taucha.net?
Taucha.
Taucha, yeah, not net. And so they're a bunch of, you probably can describe them better than me, but they just come across to me as like dive junkies. And so, and they're based in Egypt, and they're really passionate about safety on board these vessels and making a change. And they've educated me more into this, into what's happening there as well, not just in Egypt, but globally. So they spoke to me about what's happening now. I don't know if this is true, but What I do know is that there's a finite amount of licenses that Egyptian Authority for Maritime Safety hand out for these liveaboards, and I can't remember what it is, but it's a small number. And so a lot of these guys, when business is good, they would like to build another boat. However, they can't, so they take an old registration and just add another deck and another deck to that. And what I saw there was I saw boats that when you're looking at them, you think, wow, that stability would be really compromised by being that high and that narrow. But I have no evidence to suggest that this was happening, but this is what I'm hearing. And some of the operators were telling me this as well. So, yeah, there's a finite amount, and they, I guess, do what they can to try and make a buck, don't they? I'm sure you've heard these stories as well, have you? Oh, this is not new to you.
I have. And it doesn't take a genius to look at the boats when they're on the water and realise that proportionally it's a damn sight higher than what it should be.
Yep. Yeah. Probably the main cause of concern on a lot of these boats when I was on board and in my reports was the design and construction standards. So most of them were not built to a standard at all. So it's built to ensure passenger comfort and maximise the passenger experience, I guess. So you had these vessels that you walk down onto the lower deck, and you would see it without any subdivisions. So we spoke about collision bulkhead before. The boat should be divided into multiple divisions, and you can only access from one side to the other going through a watertight bulkhead. So these watertight subdivisions weren't evident on any of the vessels, and the purpose of this is to ensure that if the hull is compromised that a single failure will not sink the vessel. If you think about some famous incidents, so the Titanic, the watertight bulkheads did not extend to the top. So although the vessel was only compromised in one section, it was supposed to be unsinkable, but the watertight bulkheads didn't extend all the way to the top. So the boat took a long time to sink because the water slowly filled up one side of the bulkhead and then spilled over to the next, and the rest is history. And
history.
More recently, the Costa Concordia, that boat there, because the rip in the hull was so great, it actually went through more than two of the bulkheads. It was that long on the side, therefore more than two compartments were compromised with water, and therefore the vessel sunk. So that's the purpose of having a watertight bulkhead or subdivisions, so that a single failure doesn't compromise the vessel. And that just simply goes back to the design stage. So a lot of these boats are not going to comply with that even now, unless they make major changes, which is unlikely. But they can do other things. Like, for example, one of the vessels I looked at had a stability book. So the stability book is there to ensure that the vessel is operated within its limitations by the crew and the operator. So none of these boats had these stability books. That doesn't mean it didn't exist, but it certainly wasn't on board the vessel. And the knowledge of most of these captains, they probably wouldn't really understand how to read it or what parts to apply from that as well. So that, I guess those two big things they were really poor, to not see that on board the boats. And that makes them, without those two things above everything else, just inherently unsafe like that.
Yeah.
Which we saw those two things were most likely the cause of concern or cause of failure for the Sea Story that went down. Yeah. Sorry, Matt, I interrupted.
Is it difficult to get a stability book, or is it just a lack of training and knowledge?
So this is done at the design stage, generally by the designer or naval architect, and we develop a stability book for the vessel. On a smaller vessel, on larger vessels, they model it to work out the stability. They can complete an incline experiment where they put weights and simulate the weight that will be going on the boat, and then they move it from side to side, take measurements, go back to the modelling and do it that way. And we do even simplified tests on smaller vessels in where we would move just barrels of water around, and we simulate the movement of passenger from one side to another, measure the loss of freeboard, and then determine how many passengers can be on this boat, for example.
The loss of freeboard?
Yeah. Sorry, how much the boat dips down on one side and the other. Yeah. On the stability book, you might even see some limitations placed on there. For example, the master must ensure that there is no more than X amount of passengers on the upper deck, or there's not more than X amount of passengers on the foredeck, for example. And that should be known, like that should be clear. And so, unfortunately, that sort of knowledge was not there.
Yeah. So, I mean, a perfect diving example of that is when everyone's getting ready to go for a dive, and almost every man and his dog is on the back deck on the dive platform. And if people can visualize in their head, the weight would be bringing the rear of the vessel and pointing the bow up to the sky.
Yeah, good point. I mean, whale watching tours have that problem. You know, when the whale's on the port side, everyone runs over there.
Oh, yeah.
There was an incident on one of those where there was fatalities, unfortunately, as well, sadly, in Canada. It was probably nearly 10 years ago now that I remember reading about that one, where the boat just capsized from people moving from one side to the other. But again, was it being operated in accordance with its stability book? Probably not as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as far as getting prepared to, or deciding on which liveaboard you're going to go on, there's a lot of the websites out there that advertise for liveaboards will have so much data on there that it provides this feeling of being safe. But that feeling of being safe is just a massive information on a page, and within the safety section, shall we call it, is a lot of words and a lot of green ticks. And it's very easy for an operator to sign themselves up to a website like this, and then we're relying on that operator to say what they've got on board. All of a sudden, you've got all these superb green ticks. So my question to you would be that as a dive agent, as a booking agent for operators, what can we do to try and reinforce, maybe reinforce is the wrong word, but try and clarify what is actually available on the boat safety-wise? Are there questions that we can put to the operators rather than just getting ticks from the operators and a thumbs up and a green A-OK sign? So
I think a really good starting point with the guys at Taucha, so JP and Armin mostly, on the Maritime Survey International website, there's a section there around dive, liveaboard and safari vessel surveys that we've done, and we've put there's a tab there called Standards, References and Links, and on there's the checklist that we use. And so we've made that available. We've put in there the standards that we've applied as well. So far, we've done around about 12 inspections, and we developed a rating system, so a 5-star rating system. We didn't want this to be a naming and shaming for the vessels that opted in to get it, because they're obviously paying us money. So we thought we would only record on our website the vessels that actually were at least satisfactory. So that would allow the diver to make an informed decision. Now, unfortunately, out of all the vessels that we looked at originally, most of them, like I said to you, some of the Tornado marine boats, or all of the Tornado marine boats, were at least satisfactory, but we've given them an opportunity to correct some of the deficiencies, which may make their rating at least up to good. So we're leaving it to them. So you won't see any of the boats listed on our website just yet. But I think to answer your question as what can they do, they could at least say, hey, here's a checklist that these guys at Towcher and Maritime Survey International have developed. Can we at least apply this to the vessel? Alternatively, like I went through before, we're really leaving a lot up to the passenger here to know, at least have a little knowledge on what to look for. But I think anyone can ask those questions. And like you said, you can ask for these registration and survey certificates. However, as you just mentioned, that they can hand you, especially in a lot of these countries, they will just give you this certificate and expect you to be happy with that. But in the case of the ones in Egypt, God only knows how they're issuing these certificates, because they certainly don't comply with any of even their own mandatory standards that we've seen. So you just can't trust this official government document, which is unfair on the passenger, or in our case, the divers, because, like I said before, there's just an expectation that they're going to be safe when they walk on board a commercial vessel, and they shouldn't have to feel worried about that. And could you share with me how much they're actually paying for these 1 week, 2 week liveaboard ventures?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's Egypt is it's very well known as a very cheap place to go. So you can get a 5 or 6 night liveaboard for as little as $700 US. And then it can range up to 3,000 or 4,000 depending on how much lux you want and what locations or regions of the Red Sea you're going to. Some even push down into Sudanese water, northern Sudanese. So the prices go up a bit, but I think it's fair to say, with the amount of vessels that are available in Egypt, that it's very much a race to the bottom pricing market. There's a constant battle to, make it 5-star luxury and give everything for $10. So I do genuinely believe that, greed has a significant role in everything we're discussing around safety.
Can you tell me when someone comes to you and wants to go on a dive liveaboard trip, what would you say rate as the, I guess the most important thing to them, what are, I guess, the things that they're looking for, the features? Like, do they ever ask about safety? Do they just ask about price and location?
Yeah.
Okay.
Generally, I'll get inquiries and there'll be, I can jump on X boat. How much is it going to cost me? Well, that particular trip is going to cost you X amount. And it's usually followed up with the reply that, oh, well, I found it on another website at this price. Okay, fill your boots, go for it.
So you're just talking about price.
It's always down to price. Very rarely it's down to safety. I think maybe in the last 5 years I've been asked about safety 3 times. It's that level of assumption that we spoke of earlier on. It's a boat that's registered to take divers, and everybody assumes that it's going to be safe. And this is why I'd like to do the round table, so that we can raise that level of awareness to would-be customers, but also get the insider look on it as well, because within the Red Sea, we do have those genuine operators that want to do their best and bring their best game to the table. And they're being black-handed or black-marked with everyone else that's more, that effectively doesn't give a shit about safety. They just want to make money. So I want to bring a balanced view from all angles. This is why I'm talking to you as the expert on what you do. And I've got many other experts that want to come on board that are expedition leaders, operators that own vessels, guys that have just built their first liveaboard vessel and the safety elements that they're putting into place, all of this kind of stuff. And even people that have been on boats that have had major accidents or incidents, and have a balanced view on it so that everybody can benefit. And, not just a point the finger kind of game. But my overarching desire is to somehow raise the awareness to the customer, the person that's going to go on what could possibly be their trip of a lifetime, depending on their budget, and their dreams. But we want to make it safe. And the best way to do that right now is to educate that person, because trying to put into place something that's, a requirement at a higher level is going to take a very long time, if it even occurs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was made pretty clear to us there. I'll just share on so firstly, when we had a meeting, so 𝐧𝐿𝐽 guys organised a conference call with around about 40 different dive liveaboard operators, and of which only 2 of them signed up to us to have these inspections done. That said, I did get a lot of emails from them, and a lot of the timing that when we were going to be there didn't match up. But we have another trip planned soon with our surveyor from Spain going down to Egypt, which is a lot more feasible for us, and we can make it cheaper for them. But the questions we were getting from them all were really good, and I guess it was obvious that people that would come to a forum like that would be interested in just getting better, and having better business. And what I saw from the Tornado guys, that they saw in real money terms, that having a safer boat meant actually getting better clients and getting a 12-month quite lucrative charter for them. Some of the other things I came across, I guess you get the impression that these boats weren't very good, right? But I just thought it'd be of interest to tell you that not one of the vessels that I looked at, and in the engineering section, and I'm obviously being a marine engineer, I'm more focused on the engineering side of things just naturally, but not one of the vessels even had a bilge alarm installed anywhere on the vessel. So out of these 14 boats, and on the first boat that I was on, I'm looking around for this bilge alarm, and I've got the engineer with me, an Egyptian guy, and I was trying to explain to him what a bilge alarm was, and then he's like, dawned on him, one of the other guys explained to him what I was looking for, and he said to me, we removed that because it was too noisy. So I was like, God. Well, who could ever argue with that logic, eh? So
yeah.
Almost all the engine rooms that I went on, the bilges were filled with oil and water. Many of the bilge pumps were not working, and there was also no secondary means of pumping or anything like that. The lighting was inadequate.
Just for people that aren't engineers and boaties, sure. Why is that an important point?
The bilge pumping systems. If one bilge, a bilge pump is a positive displacement pump or a pump that removes the water from the vessel's hull. Now, if one of those fail, you really need that secondary means of pumping to start pumping out. And the bilge alarm is there to alert the master or engineer on board the vessel that there's water in the bilge. And we rely on these pumps to work. Most boats you would see at least 2 pumps, like mechanical pumps on board. Generally, on these larger boats, you won't see those small low voltage, extra low voltage 12-volt bilge pumps, and they're pretty useless at the best times anyway, because they're not rated for continuous use. They'll only work for a couple of minutes, and then the little bimetal electric strip in it will stop, and then they'll start again a bit later, but it just won't keep up with the inflow of water. So it's important for bilge pumping. I don't know. I could go on with there was not many machinery guards on the main engines and generators, so you had to be really careful walking around in there. There was the exhaust systems on a lot of the boats had leaks. There was a lot of corrosion. They were poorly insulated, poorly mounted. None of the vessels that I looked at had which this actually surprised me, because I thought the Red Sea was really focused on grey and black water discharge, if anything, but not one of the boats I looked at had a black water treatment system on board. So for any of the
what's a black water?
Yeah, so when you go to the toilet, the water will go into a holding tank, and there's different types of black water treatment systems, but not too different to what we have on land, where the water goes to a treatment plant, all the wastewater goes to a treatment plant, and then it is sent off as lower grade water or goes back out to sea when it's all filtered with all of the toxic waste in there. And we have these smaller versions of these black water treatment systems or grey water treatment systems on board the boat. So black water is the toilet water, and grey water is like from your sinks and showers. So prior to going outside the boat, then that water should be treated so that it doesn't harm any of the environment outside. So I didn't see one of those. There was certainly no oily water discharge. So in one of the MARPOLs, so the requirements, so the that's the convention that controls the oil, water, and waste discharge. They specify that when you are discharging oil, you can on ships, but it must be no greater than 15 parts per million of oil in the water. So what that means to the layman is that there would be no sheen on the water. You wouldn't see like an oily sheen on the water.
Yeah.
And so it goes through this what's called like a coalescence filter, and that removes the oil from the water and then discharges the waste. So although some of these boats were probably too small to trigger that, but they didn't have any means of capturing that oil. So your guess is as good as mine where all that oil from the bilge ends up.
Yeah. And that's, I think, without looking it up, 790-ish liveaboard vessels in Egypt that are probably all doing the same.
Yeah, you would say so. Yeah, you would say so.
Did you look at the Red Sea for its its state? I don't think people see the Red Sea as an open ocean where you're going to get big waves kind of thing. They see it as a closed, rather large gap in the land. But I've been trying to push the fact that the weather conditions can get pretty damn mighty.
Oh yeah, it gets pretty shitty there. I've sailed up through the Suez Canal, so I've sailed up through from Dubai, make a right hand turn and then go up the through the Red Sea and then into the Suez. Down the bottom, especially towards the bottom of the Red Sea, it gets really, really choppy. It's not the most pleasant of waters, and they're quite short, stumpy little waves all the time around there as well. So no, and they get the largest shamals and winds throughout the Middle East there as well. So yeah, it can be not so pleasant at all. I must say though, I while I was there on both the recent trips I did, I did manage to go for a swim in the Red Sea, and it is gorgeous. It is beautiful. It's really clear. The second time I made sure I brought my goggles so that I could actually see some stuff. And I just had a couple of mornings free, and I thought I'll go for a quick swim. And it was gorgeous. It was very
under no illusion. There's a reason people go to the Red Sea, and the corals and the biodiversity is fantastic, let alone the wrecks as well.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic location. Just need to sort out the shit above the surface, really.
Yeah, I actually went to Dahab when I was as a 21-year-old backpacker, so a long time ago, and I actually did a dive around there on the Red Sea, and it was gorgeous, and always wanted to get back there. I didn't think I'd go back there 20 or 30 years later. Nearly 30 years later, inspecting boats, but I was really happy to get back. So the people in Egypt, like the guys' boats that we were inspecting, just super polite, super nice. Like really, they weren't your normal vessel operator that we deal with. That it can, it can get heated at times or confrontational or whatever. But these were very, very nice people and very accommodating as well. like, I don't want to paint a bad picture of Egypt by no stretch of the imagination. Like and the waters there were amazing.
Yeah. No, I echo that. It's about 18 months, 2 years ago now that I was over in Jordan with a mate of mine on a photography competition, and hosted by Mohammed Ledawi at Big Blue Dahab, Big Blue Aqaba, sorry, and there couldn't be more courteous and welcoming if you tried. It's a fabulous location and people to be around. I really enjoyed it. And the same, I've been to Dahab several times, and many years ago I even did my first dive in just off the wall at Dahab.
Cool.
Yeah. So the other thing that crosses my mind as well when we're talking about the way that the majority of the boats seem to be substandard is that maybe with the cut and paste cookie kind of cutter way that operations are being made out there, that the standards have just dropped over the years with rinse and repeat and copying the next guy to get a boat out there and start making money. And I wonder if there's a major lack of education on this topic. And I think from this discussion alone, that kind of highlights there's a major hole there that needs to be filled.
Certainly is. You're aware that after the Sea Story incident, so I'm sure a lot of your listeners would be aware of that one, but so that's the incident that happened in October, November last year, in which the vessel capsized and people died. I don't want to give the number because I'll get it wrong. So as a result of this incident and the heat that they were getting mostly from the UK government, the UK have since issued a warning to travellers going to Egypt and boarding these boats. But one of the things the Egyptian Maritime Authority immediately did was made sure that the engineers had their licenses. And speaking to the guys there, none of them, or most of them, did not have engineering licenses on board these boats, and it wasn't necessarily their fault. The Egyptian Maritime Authority was the one that issues it to these seafarers, and many had applied or done courses and hadn't received it. So, their admin was quite poor, but there was just a lack of people to actually go on board these boats. So my understanding was that as a result of that, they were cancelling a lot of trips, not because they felt the boats were unsafe, just because they could not get the crew with the appropriate license on board.
And that therein caused a knock-on effect and an issue because people were heading out to location to get on a particular boat that they've booked, only to find that when they get there, the boat wasn't leaving port and they were being placed onto substandard replacement boats, which made the situation even worse. So again, this is the thing that we've got to try and protect against, and maybe by bringing that education level up as well. And there's nothing we can do to bring that education level up in Egypt. That's on them. But we can certainly bring up the education level of the listeners and the people that are going to be getting on these vessels.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
I made a list of the things that you would do if in an ideal world, but obviously this is not really, well, let's just say in an ideal world, because I can't see this sort of thing happening in Egypt. But you could adopt and enforce international standards. The problem with enforcement there, because they don't have the money, of course. You could invest in education and training. I think in a country like Egypt, though, they've probably got other things to be spending money on than this. You could make the certification and inspection mandatory, so not being done by the Egyptian Maritime Authority, because probably the best way to put it is that system's been compromised. So the people that are inspecting and certifying those vessels, maybe they need to go to a third party or someone else to do that. But I think the one thing that we can do is that we can encourage public accountability. These charterers, like divers, passengers, they have a crucial role to play. start being inquisitive when you are making a booking, as we've spoken about. Start making inquiries about safety measures. When was it last inspected? Ask all these things. If I give our company a plug, ask them if they've engaged with MSI to do an inspection. That'd be great. But I think more broadly, that I think is the easiest thing that we can implement, right? Like without having a massive bucket of money and relying on government agencies to do something, just start asking questions from the operator.
If you had,
Matt, can I just pause for 1 second? I've got someone at the door. Just want to let him in. Sorry, that's pretty unprofessional.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, mate. I'll be 1 second.
That's all right. I'll put the kettle on. It's easy just to pause. But yeah. So in fact, let me turn that kettle off. That's going to be back. When we're thinking about the liveaboards and people getting on the boat, agents as well that are bringing operations onto their websites, etc. If you had to choose 10 questions or points to ask, because there's a lot of information in that checklist, what would be the top 10 for you?
So maybe start with the easy ones, like ask them about the certification. So has your vessel been inspected and does it have a certificate, like a certificate of registration or survey or something like that? So something that will give them some sort of comfort in that way. And then I guess you could, if you wanted to go deeper, say, does the vessel have an approved stability book? Can I see a copy of it, like even if they just showed them the front cover? And you could ask them if the vessel complies with the minimum subdivision requirements as well. So that's not 10, but that's probably a good start. And then you could go deeper into the other ones, like fire safety. Ask them about fire extinguishers, fixed firefighting systems. You'd ask them about safety equipment like life rafts and life jackets and things like that. So I would start with the certification of compliance and ask them, when was it last inspected? Even perhaps why not ask for a copy of that safety report? So when was it last inspected? Can I have a copy of that report? They're probably reluctant to give that sort of thing, but you can ask. They're only going to say no, aren't they? So yeah.
So when you go out and inspect a vessel like you've done with these ones previously, you obviously provide them with an inspection report.
Yes.
Is it something that they can then put on their website and say, look, we have had an independent audit from MSI, if they wanted to put a link up to the report, or at the very least highlight that they've been audited independently as opposed to just the local government?
Well, that's actually the intention. So we'll be putting it on our site. The guys at Towcher have made the star rating. You can see how it's implemented on our website. So whether it's 54321. So if the boat is on our website, then generally it would be a good one. But we need a greater sample size, though. At the moment, we've only just started this, and we need more buy-in from the operators. So, for the moment, it'd be great if more people were doing it. We've had inquiries even in Indonesia, Maldives. So we've had inquiries that have been coming in, but that's all they are at the moment.
Yeah. And at the moment, the price point is probably a concern for operators, I would imagine.
That's true. Like it's around about €3,000 to get an inspection done. We have that advertised on our site as well. For a lot of these, I understand that's an expensive cost, but it's also expensive for us to get people out there and do the work as well. And then there's a risk that we hold as well with our PI and PL insurances that we have to have when we're looking at these boats also. So, that's the reason for the higher costs.
Yeah.
The inspections usually take a couple of days as well. So, and then we put a report together as well. So it's a lot of involvement from our end.
Yeah. And is it Tauscher that are organising, or advertising the fact that you guys are going to be on location at X date and people can book a slot if they want to?
Yeah, they have. Tauscher have been great. They've been promoting it I must say they get a lot of on their Facebook site. Whenever they put something up there about doing inspections, there's a lot of people that just bag it and just saying it's a money grab and things like that. And we're always going to get people that will think that as well. But I must say from my end, it certainly hasn't been lucrative or anything like that. We wouldn't have even broken even at the moment with the money we've invested in trying to do this. So it mostly been out of interest. Obviously, there was a long-term approach. We thought that maybe we could set the original standard, and then hopefully we get a lot of people adopting it into it. But I realise that's going to be really tough because most of the vessel operators that we're dealing with are not going to be able to afford it. But in the case of like Tornado Marine, that they really saw the value in that, and I honestly I think that without us being there, they most likely wouldn't have been rewarded with these larger vessel contracts that they've achieved.
Yeah. And I think it's it's probably common sense dictates. If the operator's gone to the extent of investing, a hefty lump of money into getting an independent audit done, then it highlights in big neon lights that they're keen to make sure that the service they're providing is at top notch and professional and above all safe.
Agreed.
I think just keep on going at it, buddy, because it can only grow.
Well, hopefully. We don't want there to be more incidents and accidents, but unfortunately they just keep coming, don't they? Like I'm sure you have an alert set up as well. I mean, I have a Google alert set up for these liveaboard incidents and accidents, and they just keep coming. It's not great.
No, yeah, and it's it is a big issue everywhere. I mean, a lot of people will argue that there's more incidents now because there's so many more vessels on the water. Yeah, that's understandable, but at the same side of the coin, a lot of those vessels out there are still being built to 1980s standards, and that's about it.
Yeah, or no standards.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, mate. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Oh no, I was just going to say I was going to share with you about the shipyards in Alexandria. That was like walking back into 1980s. So.
Really?
Well, I mean, they just don't have the like contemporary safety standards and so on and so forth. There. So I went to a yard. Actually, went to one in all over. So in Alexandria, where they were building steel ships there. Another one in Sharm el-Sheikh where they were refitting and building timber boats, and a variety of all different ones near Hurghada as well. They're doing a lot of work, but in terms of the workers' safety standards in the shipyards, they're not something that you would be familiar with locally or anything like that. But always interesting to see.
Flip flops.
Yeah.
Flip flops and a fag hanging out your mouth.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay, cool. Hey, before we round it out,
Sure.
Can I entice you to come into the roundtable chat at some point in the future?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
That'd be awesome. Be awesome to have your knowledge on side, so that if people get a bit confused or need clarification, then you're the subject matter expert.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. I think we'll round it out for that at the moment. We've been going for an hour and a half, so I think we've done well there.
There we go. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Matt. I do appreciate it. And I'll definitely start hooking into the show and learning more about what you guys do as well. And and I'll shout out to the guys at Toucher as well, because I'm sure they're doing a lot of things in line with what you are as well.
Yeah. I did send them a quick message, and I sent an invite to come on the podcast, and it's a thumbs up, but then there's been no response following a thumbs up. It's probably not high on their list of things to do.
I don't know. They always seem to be interested in doing that stuff. I'll mention it to them for sure. Yeah.
Happy days. All right. Mick, thanks very much for your time, mate. And I'll give you a shout when we push this out, and I'll put all the links into MSI on the show notes. and bid you a good weekend.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure.
Most appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, listeners. Ciao for now.